Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope lunch was good. I'm Rob Doherty, SVP of Productions at Cake in London. And this afternoon, we're going to look at how co-production and co-financing can work, how to go about building the alliances that need to get a project off the ground, and what creative and business compromises might need to be made in order to realize these multiplayer projects. Before we dive in, a reminder that at the end of the session, Steve Smith from Beacus will be in Wonder for a 45-minute chat, so please do join him in there. At the same time, there'll be a chance to meet with contributors to our video on innovation in production techniques. John Rennie of Clothcat Animation and Phil Stewart from Blue Zoo will be in Wonder from 3 p.m. to talk about the opportunities presented by using Unreal Engine in animation production. If you're not in Wonder already, the link and password are being posted in the chat right now. Remember, put this in a Chrome browser to make it work seamlessly. Use the Q&A button down below to ask questions. We'll get to them at the end, but send them in as they occur to you. So, let's introduce our speakers and their projects. We have Julia Rowlands from Zodiac Kids, Steve Smith from Beacus, and Alex van Blanken from 16 South. We're going to start with Steve. Steve, could you please tell us a brief bit about you and Beacus, and then about the project you're talking about today specifically, please?
Sure. Yes, I run an animation studio called Beacus, and we've been running for 10 years, or 11 years now, and make lots of kids media animation on a few different shows for different people, but also our own shows, our own IP. We made Oliver Bob Top, and I co-produce Yakety. And I'm here really talking about a development project that's going to be a co-production called Big Lizard.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. Alex, again, a little context of what you do at 16 South, and then could you tell us a little bit about Odo?
Yeah, hi, Rob. Hi, everyone. So I'm Alex from 16 South Rights, which is our distribution business of 16 South. I started in the company in 2018, so I've been helping look after, get Odo off the ground and get it greenlit and into production. So I'm going to be talking about our co-production with Letgo today. So it's a 16 South and Letgo co-production for our brand new comedy preschool series called Odo, which launched on Milkshake in August.
Thank you, Alex. And
you're very welcome.
Lastly, but certainly not leastly, Julia. At Zodiac, you work on a range of projects. Could you give us a couple of animated co-production examples, perhaps, that you've worked on?
Hi, yes, hi. Hi, Bob, hi, everyone. Yes, so I'm VP of Sales, Acquisitions and Co-Productions at Zodiac Kids. I look after all three things, as my title says. I was going to talk to you about a range of co-productions we've done over the years, illustrated with a few case studies, with productions that are delivering as we speak at the moment. One of them is Mumphy, which is a preschool show, and another one is called Yellow Yeti, which has started delivery, but it's continuing to deliver for quite a while.
Great. Thank you very much. Nice introductions, everyone. We're going to now dive a little bit into the background of the projects and how they came to be, rather. So Steve, again, starting with you, at what point did France Télévisions become involved with Big Lizard?
Well, we were discussing Big Lizard with them for quite a long time. So we're currently doing a development period with them, which means we have to create some development materials. And that's more sort of official, and that's been the last sort of 6 to 9 months. But before that, we were talking to them for possibly even 3 years, on and off, because my director's French, and he knew the people at France Télévisions, so he was already talking about the project when it was very nascent and wasn't really a preschool project, actually, when it started out, when I first sort of got involved. I was just looking back, and it's actually exactly 4 years, I think, since he first messaged me about it. So I've known him for a long time, and this is his first show idea. I want to say idea, maybe he's had other ideas, but this is the one that's happening. And I think it was almost 4 years to the day since he got in touch. That's how long it's been.
Wow. And you're in production now?
Well, we're in development.
Now. It does take a while.
Yeah, with a hope to go into production January, very soon.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Alex, I believe Odo has a European co-production partner too, but had a slightly different journey as the IP was brought to you. Do you want to just talk us through that journey a little bit and how the idea got to the screen?
Yeah, so the original, I suppose, the original artwork was brought to us by Jakub at Letko in Poland. So us, I say the royal us, was mainly so my boss and creative director of the company, which is Colin Williams. I'm sure everyone will know. So that was discussed early on. So Odo was a basically self-published book by a chap who had illustrations done on a character and a world. Really, really simple. Nothing that would create nothing in that book contained anything other than the original artwork that you could make into 52 by 7s. So we kind of discussed that. We got on creatively. I think Colin and Jakub saw eye to eye because it was really beautiful artwork that was done, handcrafted artwork that was done that we really developed further into the world. And yes, we have a European co-production partner in Kika, as well as our commissioning broadcaster in the UK, which is Channel 5's Milkshake. So really with those two partners and with Letko's involvement and the fact that Colin really fell in love with the world and the design and the look and actually he was, at the time, we'd been looking at creating and developing new ideas. We create and develop our own IP in-house and have done for the last 14 years. But at the time in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, Colin was looking at the sort of really worrying statistics within kids within Northern Ireland, because the studio is based in Belfast. So anxiety and depression leading to suicide levels in kids and teenagers. And obviously as a studio, we always love to tell entertaining stories, but there's a heart and there's a thread of messaging, and we try and tackle these things head on within all of the shows that we've done through Lily's Stratford Bay, Big City Park, which is a puppet series filmed in Belfast, live action, our own IP again, Lily's Stratford Bay, Claude, developed from a book series. There is a messaging there. And I think the idea of Odo together, with this brilliant artwork, Colin had this idea of, can we tell stories that promote self-efficacy and confidence in kids to help tackle these worrying levels of depression and anxiety and statistics that are probably even worse now. I think we're all we've all been through the last 18 months, kids included. So I think it's really a show that's it's come out at exactly the right time. As I mentioned previously, it's launched on Milkshake it launched in early August with just 10 episodes actually. So yeah, that's the sort of very brief history around Odo. I'm not giving it justice just yet, but yeah.
I don't think you can ever do anything the development process and its full journey, can you, from script?
Yes, I've summarized years worth of work and years worth of work and time into 30 seconds. So I do apologize to anyone.
No, but I think what would be interesting, just to understand, and I'll ask the same to Julie. I didn't ask Stephen. I can go back and ask Stephen in a sec. The pipeline, so how is it broken down? How is the production itself now broken down between the various co-production partners? Who looks after what elements for Odo? Sorry, Alex.
Oh, for Odo. Sorry. I thought you were asking Julia. Apologies.
I'm going off script already. Greg's having
no problem. No problem at all. So basically, Letko are an established animation studio based in Warsaw, in Poland. Yeah. They have. I think Colin and Jakub saw eye to eye in terms of the creative process. So we get on creatively, which is obviously really important between two studios and two creatively driven studios. So Letko handle all animation. We show run. We have written all scripts. We do post, music, sound design, mix, etc. in the UK. But Letko handle everything in terms of animation, from animation onwards.
That's exactly what I was after there. Steve, again, sorry, Julia, I will come to you in a sec, but I'm going to just jump back to Steve. What's the structure like for yours in the pipeline?
Yeah, so we're doing the pre-production mostly. So we're writing, we're writing just over half of the scripts. and we're looking after the animatics, but the storyboards are being done in France, and the animation will all be done in France, and then obviously voices and all the English stuff as well. So it's quite heavily leaned towards France, but that's partly because I'm a small studio and partly to do with finance, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit.
Yeah, we will come on to that side of it later, I think, and also, yeah, creatively. But thank you for that. I just thought it was good for everyone to get an understanding of how they break down as well. Sorry, Julia, I'll come to you now. So again, would you like to tell us about some of your projects and your own experiences of co-productions recently?
Yeah. I think, so the slight difference between us and the other guys is probably that we have possibly a slightly larger company, and we've got two headquarters, one in London and one in Paris, which means that we've got access to funding from both from the CNC and the various funding models in France, and then of course in the UK. All of our series have been financed through international co-productions and various funding models, but there's always a co-production element in there. Mumphy in particular, the preschool show that I mentioned, is quite a traditional setup. That's a show that was brought to us by Allcroft, who's the creator of the original 1990s version. And we then co-developed that to make it more contemporary. And then started to find financing. And that's been a long journey, as invariably is with most of the projects. It takes quite a long time to get something off the ground. Mumphy is a co-production between France TV and RAI in Italy, and has also been pre-bought by Kika in Germany. There's a work split between France and Italy to maximize funding coming from each market. In order to get a commission from RAI, we had to form a co-production with an Italian production studio called Animoca. So that's pretty much how that has come together. So both, the commissioning financing from France TV and RAI, and then the tax credits coming out of Italy and out of France, and as I said, pre-buy out of Germany. The other project that I was going to talk about is a 6+ animation, which is called The Unstoppable Yellow Yeti. We haven't actually launched that yet. That is in production. That has come about through co-production and co-development with a Finnish producer called Gigglebug, which you probably all know. That came to us with some financing attached out of Scandinavia through Gigglebug. So both for public broadcasters were on board there, and particularly, of course, YLE in Finland, where Gigglebug is based. There is some tax funding coming out of Finland as well, and the rest of the financing is coming through a commission by Disney EMEA. And key to that commission from Disney EMEA was that Disney France was part of it as well as one of the commissioning parties, which again meant that we could at least partially access CNC funding out of France.
Great, thank you. And again, just picking one of them, maybe Mumphy, as it's in production. They're
both actually in production, yeah.
Oh, they both are. Sorry, my apologies. But you can choose whichever one you want then. How does that production pipeline break down between different countries, just in a very simple way, in the same way that I asked Steve and Alex?
So it's a very good question, which I can't answer in detail. There's a work split between Italy and France. I think the scripting is definitely done out of France. Animation, I think, is partly done out of Italy. Usually when we get involved out of France, it's the scripting, it's the pre and the post-production that we do, and the animation work is outsourced to a co-production partner. What the exact work split is in this particular case, I would actually need to speak to the production about.
That's fine. I think what I was trying to highlight here is there are many different ways that productions can be split amongst co-production partners. And I know we're coming into the detail of that later, but I just wanted to give a bit of an overall picture for people listening.
Yeah, I think what's key to understand about the work split it always depends what you need to do in what country to maximize funding coming out of that country. And there, certain boxes you need to tick and certain things that need to be carried out.
Exactly. I think that split and the financing always dictates where some of that work will actually take place, and sometimes in extreme cases with China, for example. But do you think, Julia, could any of those projects happen without co-production, do you think, for you?
No. No, unless you do deficit financing, which we certainly don't do. There are many ways to raise financing, but co-production is one of the key ways for us to do it. I think especially if you want to maximize tax shelters from various territories, it always has to be done via co-production. I think that there's some. We're talking to Australia at the moment for another project that we are sort of half financed now, and where there is potentially an opportunity to turn it into an Australian co-production. Which again would allow us to access tax shelter there. But the alternative would be to do service work in a country like Australia, which again is liable to some tax rebates. So so you could, in some instances, you can access tax shelters without a proper co-production and just with servicing work. It depends a little bit on the territory.
Yeah, that's kind of a co-production loophole, though, isn't it? Just quickly before we move into the business side a little bit more, Steve, would you say that could any of your projects that you've worked as co-productions worked without that co-production partnership?
No, again, probably for the same reasons as Julia. It's funny because when you're developing something, you think of it as your own project, and that's the difficult thing, I guess, is if you've developed it from scratch, you feel the sort of ownership of it. And so it's important for me, it's important to sort of follow a project through and still feel like that despite having co-produced with people, which means that everything has to go well, the creative has to be maintained, and the people you're working with believe in it too.
It's an interesting point, and I think we'll sort of touch on that in a minute when we come to creative compromise with co-productions and how you feel, because that's an interesting. So if you just sort of put a pin in that for a moment, then we'll come back to that exact point in a minute. But just firstly, Alex, again, do you think you could get Odo away without a co-production, or was it dependent?
Odo specifically, no, because we did in total 11 pre-sales as part of the finance plan, which included, as I mentioned before, Kika and a Milkshake commitment, as well as a Canal Plus commitment in France. So we sold it quite extensively, pre-sold it, quite extensively, and we're still left with some sort of gaps to fill and trying to greenlight production, really. So without the co-production element involved, I don't think we would have gotten Odo off the ground. That's not to say we've done co-productions before as a studio. Our last IP was I mentioned before, was Claude for Disney Junior. That was produced in-house. That wasn't co-produced. I had Disney Junior as a commissioning broadcaster. But I don't think that will probably happen our model now is to look at, anything that we develop in-house. Our model now is to look at, the fastest, best routes to co-produce and finance the production. Otherwise, you could be sitting on something for years before you're able to actually green light it. So
absolutely, and I think we're talking about co-productions here, but I think it's almost inevitable that most productions are going to be co-productions these days, unless one of the really big platforms comes in like Netflix or Hulu, and they just buy everything, including the rights, outright, but you get all the money in one lump. But then you don't have any rights, and you don't have any right retainership. So yeah, a co-production I think is essential to being able to retain some rights, but obviously it's a bigger jigsaw puzzle to put together and takes longer and is more complicated. So yeah, okay.
And I think maybe to add to that, I think it depends on the project, and it depends what you want to get and how you want to monetize a project. Sometimes a commission by a Netflix might make sense for you. Yes, you lose all your rights for a long time, but if you make a very good production margin on a very high budget to begin with, then that of course can be very interesting. But if not, then co-productions are definitely more interesting for financing rather than doing dozens of pre-sales, because in the end, you probably won't benefit from any tax shelters, and you lose all your rights. So yeah, I think that's why it's sort of front and center of most of the production financing now.
Yeah, I think it's an essential part of the conversation, isn't it, when it comes to financing shows? Thank you. And we sort of segue straight neatly into the compromising side of things, and we'll focus maybe on the potential compromises that need to be made on the business side of things. We'll come to the creative in a minute, but Alex, what impact did you find co-production having on the financial process, and how did it affect the situation, such as we've just been touching on, the rights, for example?
I mean, the co-production process specifically on Odo was, I mean, it was a fairly complicated cocktail. I mean, I have a financing background, so I worked for a production financier for 6.5 years. So I kind of have a bit of experience, or I had a bit of experience going into Odo in terms of structuring co-productions, what we're looking for, tax credits, things like that. So I thought I could leave my financing knowledge behind, but it's followed me, which has its benefits obviously for the company. But I think with Odo, the first challenge with Odo specifically was the fact that the Polish government had just introduced a tax, they call it a cash rebate, it's a tax credit effectively on qualifying expenditure. So that was a new thing that we wanted to make sure that was. We did have to do our due diligence on it, is the professional term, I think, and just make sure that all works, because it was Letco, I think, were one of the first companies, or it was one of the first ones that was applying for and to be approved, because you have to supply all your documentation in Poland to have the approval, kind of like how we have in the UK with our tax credit certification, but it's a little bit more detailed in Poland at the early stages. And also they had a production funding grant for Polish producers and co-productions as well, administered by the Polish Film Institute, which is the same as our British Film Institute effectively. So it was just, we've never co-produced with Poland before, we'd never worked with Letco before. So I think it was, and we hadn't done a co-production in a few years. As I said before, Claude was all produced in-house. So it was just to make sure that I think that the initial complications were to make sure that we understood everything, that we structured everything legally correctly, that we were, we were confident in the values that were being communicated through estimates and accountants and things like that. So I think it was just a bit of extra legwork, as it were, and definitely in terms of structuring and paperwork, there was a little bit more. There's more paperwork in co-production. I don't think there's any hiding away from that. But that, I mean, and that took us the best part of 2020, if I'm honest. Yeah. So, but we got it over the line. So I think for Odo specifically, the main challenge was just it was a new thing, and I think to Steve's point earlier, it was it was kind of something that we developed in house together with Letco. We were sort of actually legally letting go of a little bit, and animation was happening in Poland. So there was also that sort of obstacle to overcome in our minds, but. I am safe to say it's all going tremendously well, and as I said, it's launched, so we have delivered some.
Well, that is a success then.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Steve. You're in earlier stages with Big Lizard, but are you finding the sort of the business dealings developing differently to other shows that you weren't doing as co-productions?
I would say no. They're all equally complex and onerous. Not being a financier in any way, it's the legal and the financial side has been the most complicated thing, which takes, like Alex said, over a year, just to work that out between you and the co-production partner. And I think everyone is coming from it from an honest and open perspective, but it's a massive commitment for yourself to part with a part of the production, which bit is it and for how much, and vice versa for the studio taking it on as well, because they've obviously got choice about what they take on as well, and they're going to invest, no doubt, even if they don't invest actual money, they're investing sort of sweat equity in terms of like putting time and effort into getting this thing off the ground before there's any money on the table at all. So it's a real commitment from both sides.
No, I agree. I feel that we could do a whole session just on the financing structure itself, and where you can look for it and how you can find it and how you then piece it together. And I think we sort of maybe touch on it a little bit later, but it's maybe this is coming into Julia and the question I've got for you, which is, having worked on a range of co-productions, all being different because every single show is completely different and unique in its own way, even if it looks on the surface to be similar. How would you recommend producers navigate those negotiations? What should they be looking for?
Well, I think for a smaller producer or essentially a company that does mainly IP development, I think it helps to partner with a bigger producer to navigate all of those challenges. And that's how certainly we've been working over the years. A lot of the series that we've produced didn't necessarily originate with us, but we've worked together with smaller producers or with developers, and have then co-developed a project and then went out to raise the financing. So I think it definitely helps to have a bigger partner on board who also has the sort of the infrastructure, the financial and the legal infrastructure in-house to deal with all of the challenges.
And when it comes to rights and revenue, which is I think the bit that most people that haven't done it before always feel a bit nervous about. You're the rights owner, but you're getting involved in a co-production. You're going to probably have to give some of those rights away. But how do you navigate those waters with your co-production partners? How do those conversations begin? And if you're talking about ownership and rights and then revenue and everything, sorry, I know that's a very large question. I'm just wondering if there's an approach or what people should be looking for, or how they might approach that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, I think the ambition is always to raise as much financing by holding on to as many rights and most of your IP as possible. So that's why I wouldn't recommend to have more than one or maximum two co-production partners in a project, and to raise the rest of the financing through commissions, where you can get financing, you can get tax credits in certain territories, but you hold on to your rights. I mean, of course you lose your broadcast rights for a certain period of time in a particular territory, but you don't lose any of your underlying rights. And depending on the partner and depending on your negotiation, you also hold on to most of your back end.
Yeah. Okay. It's a complicated question, I know. Thank you for answering it succinctly. Thank you. Here's a hot potato one for you all. Brexit. How has that impacted on CoPro, or has it even impacted on CoPro? And if it has, in your experiences, what should people be looking out for and watching for? I'm going to start with Steve, as we've not heard from Steve for a little bit.
You're not going to hear much from me either, because it hasn't impacted anything as yet. I mean, again, I'm fairly small, just doing one-off productions and stuff, and I think I'm right in saying that we don't have a co-production treaty with France, so it's not affected by Brexit in that respect.
Right.
So yeah, nothing so far.
No, it hasn't impacted you yet. Alex, what about you?
In terms of from the co-production perspective, no, we can't.
I don't need your political views right now, thank you.
No, I know, because then we'd be going on till 6 o'clock tomorrow morning with a few whiskeys, actually. But no, from a co-production perspective, I mean, it hasn't impacted much. I mean, we can't apply for Creative Europe anymore. You know, some stages you can. So I'd say that's the one notable thing. You know, in certain stages of production, you probably could as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been a while since we've done an application. But no, in terms of Odo specifically, it hasn't impacted it. I mean, the good news still to this day, I've heard rumors of the past months, but you know, UK content still considered under the European Commission European. So that's our main concern in terms of Europe, and you know, even trying to sell a finished production, you know, under the European broadcast rules and the quota. So that's the main concern that I think could affect us all directly, really quickly. But I've heard rumors, but other than that, nothing so far. Other than that, it's a total shambles.
Can I just throw something else in there? Because you mentioned media, and I should have said that about that, because in past productions we've successfully applied for media, and it puts I don't know what I got at the time, but several £100,000 into a production, which then sits on the UK side, which gives me power to negotiate the whole rights stuff you were talking about before. So taking that away, and actually we're in a poorer position to negotiate and all that. So actually you could because that's caused by Brexit, that is a definite impact. Aside from the fact that we can also apply for development funding and lots of other types of funding, which is a shame to lose.
Yeah,
I'm not replaced by anything as far as I'm aware yet.
No, exactly. And Julia, given the structure of Zodiac and being a bigger company, have you found has Brexit had any impact on your co-production dealings, or?
No, not at the moment. And I mean, I can only agree with what the other guys are saying. It's who knows what is to come, but at the moment it hasn't affected us. And I think we're hoping that through our company structure of having a production company set in the EU and one outside, that will help us navigate any restrictions or difficulties that may be coming in.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because as Steve sort of illustrated there, sometimes when something's taken away, you don't notice it for a little while until it comes back around again. You go, oh yeah, I used to do it like that. That's gone. And like you say, it just, that little bit of power. Yeah, interesting. Okay, thank you. So that's sort of, the business side of it, if you like, but the other really important side that is affected by the business side of a co-production is the creative side. So let's discuss that. Does co-pro inevitably mean creative compromise? Do you find it frustrating? Do you find it damaging? Or actually, have you been able to embrace it as a plus when you get involved in a co-production? I'll start with Alex on this one.
So no, I'd say the sort of immediate answer to that is no. There is, and especially from our ethos, is that there is no compromise on creative, because the creative is the creative, and we seek to produce shows and tell stories that get seen by, our aspiration is that will be seen by every child of every home all around the world. So if there is a compromise to creative that will take us away from that goal and that aspiration, then that's a huge problem for us and probably will break down the relationship. So co-production as a whole does not mean that you have to creatively compromise. Are there compromises maybe perhaps in other areas? I don't know, when you are discussing rights or you are, things are open to negotiation, but for us, creative is not. There's a vision, there's a goal, and we know how to produce shows, and hopefully tell stories that make kids laugh and inspire them. So on the creative side, no, I'd say there was no compromise for us, but there are complications with coming into co-production, which I'm sure we can go into, but there is especially when you're producing with another country, there's different cultures, and these are all things that you can navigate, but the creative does not have to suffer. That I would say that would be as a non-creative, that would be my view.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's an interesting point, because I'm going to throw to Steve next, just because that segues nicely. Because in my experience as well, you always try to look for those partnerships to enhance the creative side, and someone else with a different point of view from a different culture can make you see things differently and just and raise the creative. But that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it does clash, but also you find not just the creative, but when you're creatively working together on a long-term production, different cultures and different ways of working can also not necessarily, I wouldn't say jar, but they don't always synchronize completely neatly. I don't know, Steve, does that speak to your experience a little bit?
Yeah, it does. There is obviously a difference working with people from another culture. I mean, I'm working with France, which is just not that far away, but obviously there's a difference in culture there. There's a difference in animation history kind of culture as well. And also working with France Television is working with a French broadcaster and a French production studio. So, you know, the director's French, and I'm actually the token English guy here trying to, and you know, I definitely feel I've grown up in a world where the UK preschool is really strong, you know, conceptually and scripting and ideas, narratives. So I'm sort of focused on trying to maintain that by getting great writers on this side, for example. But there's going to be a lot more when we get into the animation, I think, that will crop up that's to do with how they necessarily from their history see this piece of work compared with what I might be seeing in my head right now. And then so you could call that a compromise, or it's an opportunity to, you know, make something original as well that's got a bit of both things, and which was actually the attractive thing which drew me to this project in the first place. It was sort of neither 100% French and the director lived a long time in UK and worked in the animation industry here, so it had a real nice blend. So that's a good thing. And also, to return to sort of finance and all that stuff, we could be colloquial, you know, if it's completely UK, doesn't make it very international necessarily. So having a partner who's used to selling to Europe and abroad is a good thing for me as well. So there's advantages there.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Thanks, Steve. And Julia, in your experience, have you found that it's compromised creative?
I don't know if compromise is the right word. I mean, I would say that a project, the way it starts, once it's fully financed and it's going into development and production with various partners, it's not going to look the same as it did from the start, as it did when you went into this process. But that's not a bad thing. So the creative really depends very much on your commissioning partners, and so it will be shaped by the needs and the necessities of your commissioning partners, and that's good. That's why it's important, I think, that when you put a financing model together, that you have partners which think more or less along the same lines, and where you don't have too many opposing sort of needs from certain markets. But so I wouldn't call it compromise. I think that's just the evolution of a project. And at the same time, because I look at from a distribution point of view, sometimes we pick up third-party shows just for distribution. And quite often when shows come to us, which have been produced through sort of deficit financing or through financing parties that have nothing to do with the industry, often I find that these shows haven't gone through that level of scrutiny that you need from a broadcast partner or platform partner that really understand what they need for their audience. And you know, if it's just come out of the head of a creative and he's or she has found financing from a source that has nothing to do with the industry, that doesn't necessarily benefit the project and benefit international sales, because it just doesn't answer the needs of the industry. So I wouldn't call it compromise at all. And one example, so we are doing a co-production with a US studio at the moment, and trying to raise financing. The first step that we have sort of achieved with the financing was that we've found one of the major German broadcasters to, first of all, further develop the project with us, even though it was already quite far developed, but they wanted to go into a co-development agreement with us, which we've done, and we went through a phase of co-development with them, which is now finalized, and they're commissioning the show, and I have to say it's actually a better show for it. So yeah, I wouldn't call it compromise, but sometimes you partner with cultures, or with we in the past have tried to get a project off the ground between a German and a Chinese partner, and that just didn't work, because the things that intrinsically were intrinsic to the project then didn't pass the censorship and the rules in China, and it just fell apart in the end because the two things just couldn't fit together.
Yeah, it's an interesting point about the main commissioning parties as well. You know, you need to make sure that they're kind of aligned in what they need the show to do when they're from differing cultures. I have had the experience of that, where in production, notes coming in from commissioners have completely clashed with each other, and you're stuck in the middle going, well, I don't know, we can't we can't do either of these because the other one's not going to like it. So making sure, I mean, for me, it's always very much about communication and collaboration from day one anyway, and making sure you understand the partners you're with, doing due diligence on them in every level, I suppose, from everyone, from your co-production partners through to your commissioning partners and everything, making sure that everyone's on the same page all the way through, because that's the only way you can get through something like that.
And I think from a distribution point of view, you will hopefully at the end of that process, you will have a product that sells much better, because it has gone through, stages of creative discussion. Yeah,
it is interesting, isn't it? But like you say, I think with the right communication, it should plus the show that you have if you do it in the right way. So yeah, compromise can be good. Just before we're going to jump into some Q&As in a moment, but just before we do, I just wanted to see if there was one takeaway tip that you'd give producers embarking on their first co-production. What would it be? Or if they're even considering it. So just a sort of a nice tip that people can focus on. So Alex, what about yourself? What would you suggest?
Life's too short to not work with people that you don't like. So if the financing looks amazing and they're bringing all this to the table, but you just don't get on as people, as creatives, or, I mean, hopefully you get on from a creative vision, but otherwise you wouldn't be even considering it. But yeah, it's just, life's too short to not work with people you don't like. So, don't think that you have to co-produce something because you have to, hopefully you get on with the people. And because I think at the end of the day, we're kids entertainers as well. So, we can, it's hard work, but we can have fun whilst doing it, especially if we work with people that we really like working with. So
yeah, it's a good tip. I mean, if you can't enjoy this industry, then you're probably not cut out to work at all.
No.
Well, Julia, is there sort of a big tip that you would give first timers to look out for or be aware of?
Yeah, maybe the first commissioning partner or co-production partner, but mainly commissioning partner that you choose, make sure that they don't then become an obstacle for further financing. And I see a number of projects that, not to name names, but in the UK you've got some broadcasters with small budgets, but in terms of the work split, and a lot of the work needs to be done in the UK, which will then create an obstacle for you to find further financing. And you've got a tiny bit of your budget finance, but you've got a huge amount of your production that needs to sit in the UK. And then it's really difficult to find further financing out of markets like France or where there are tax credit systems. So yeah, I think you need to scrutinize what the money entails and what it means when you partner with somebody.
Yeah, it's a good point. Balancing out what they're bringing to the table as opposed to what you've then got to, what is left on the table, if you like.
Yeah.
For you to find. So yeah, that's a good point as well. And Steve, what about yourself?
I guess I would say from like again, as sort of smaller producer, especially if you're first time, you're probably small, and so you have to, I guess you have to understand that you're going to give up some rights. You're going to give up, something that you're holding yourself as like this baby, and you're going to have to share it with people. And I always sort of try to remember that this is a part of my life right now with this project, and there'll be another one. Even, you have to have a tenacity to keep hold of this one and get it across the line and spend years of doing that. But there'll always be another one. So, if this one isn't the one that where you can keep 100% of everything and make it exactly how you wanted, there's always another one. It's about, you've got to make stuff in the end, because you could spend a long time talking about making stuff.
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, it's almost going back to the compromise, but it's almost a compromise you have to make in your head if you're going to a co-production is, I will have to share my baby with people.
Very much so, yeah.
And am I willing to do that? If I'm not, then maybe this isn't the right.
Yeah, and I think if you're in a bigger company, you might have other people with interests in it around you who would help you. And I often find that I'm talking to myself about what I'm going to give away, and is this the right thing to do? And that's quite tough. So also networking to have people who you can discuss these things with, like these events that hopefully, make people think about what they might have to do.
And I think it's understanding how much you feel your baby is worth as well, and how much you're willing to give away, which sort of goes back to Julia's point about broadcasters bringing X amount of money, but asking for XXX amount of rights.
But I think conversely, most people think that their thing is the thing. So they do want to hold all of it, and if you just watch a channel, you'll see how much is on it, and yours would be one amongst everything. So they're not as perfect as no show can be perfect. So you've got to let some of it go.
That's true, but come on, we wouldn't get into it if we weren't trying to perfect it every single time, would we?
Yeah, but we have to keep working at it.
Yeah, exactly. Look, thank you. We're going to go to the Q&A now. This is just coming in live, so I'm going to read these as they've come. I am going to start with Kate O'Connor. So I'll throw this open. Hi, Kate says, how far does the tax relief offer in different countries influence the choice of partners at development stage? How much of a priority is this in your considerations? I'll ask that to Julia first, if that's all right with you, Julia.
Good question.
Yeah, it's a deep one.
I would say that when I look at our projects in the development stage, we wouldn't. The things that you have to deliver in a particular country to maximize funding is more in the production stage and not in the development stage. So whoever you choose to co-develop something with doesn't necessarily impact the partners that you then need to maximize funding out of, like France, for example. So yeah, I think that comes sort of later on in your consideration, unless you look for a co-development partner in a country like France, for example, to begin with. And then, of course, it makes sense to look for, a strong production partner that is CNC accredited and that's got, a standing and a reputation within the industry and the broadcasters, to make it easier for you to get a commission and then the funding.
Yeah. Alex, did you have anything to add to that?
Not necessarily, other than, at the development stage, you're trying to get on creatively, really. You're trying to, and I think there's also the attraction that, if we successfully develop this and we go on to full production, that if I develop this with this partner in this particular jurisdiction, I will have access to X, Y, and Z. So I think that is always in the back of your mind as a producer anyway. But I don't think that the levels of tax, the levels of tax relief vary country to country. And to Julia's point, it varies on, what actual production and qualifying expenditure, as we call it, is actually happening at the production stage in that country. Different countries are, it varies, and the calculation varies across different jurisdictions. But I think that, you kind of, at the development stage, I think for me anyway, you're choosing a partner that is, that you're creatively aligned with, that you like, that you get on with, that you have a similar vision for the project for, and then the rest will come. And in the back of your mind, you might want to do some research that they might be able to, that co-development partner, if you go into production, will have access to certain funds. In our case, in Poland, for example. So that is something that is in the back of your mind.
Yeah, I think that's how I approach it.
But the levels of tax credits I don't think that influences your decision. I think it's the partner first, and then the tax credits are a bonus. Just to round that off.
Yeah, it depends. I think some people approach it slightly differently. They look for how they can put the funding together, and then look for partners in those areas, which is another way to do it. But it's not dissimilar. Steve, what about your experience in that side?
Yeah, I was going to say that I've in projects past, I've approached potential partners and then found that they don't have any tax credits, and then had to sort of pull back from it, which goes to development, because that once you're working with someone there, you want to commit that you're going to do this together. So I have actually had the opposite, where I've wanted to do something with somebody and then couldn't, because there was no end. They couldn't raise finance on their side that would have enabled this to happen.
Yeah, we've been in that situation as well. It is one of those things, isn't it? Sometimes it's not even that. It's just that the way you then need to structure the co-production suddenly means that you can't do it in that territory. You've got to do that element over in a different territory. And yeah,
this is like a jigsaw that only fits one way, sort of thing. Once you get a couple of pieces in.
Yeah, you need those big pieces in, and then everything else starts to slot in after that. Yeah. Interesting. Thank you. I'm just going to jump to another question from Mo Al-Bukhair. Who do I contact for help with the paperwork? A law firm? I'm assuming a co-production is a contract, sort of like service work. So let's go to Alex on that one.
Hi, Mo. So yeah, you can contact a law firm. I would advise, if you've never done this before, especially if you're creating your own IP, that you get some legal advice before entering into any agreement with any potential co-producer or co-developer. If you can, there's various people out there, and there's various companies out there. But yeah, especially if you've never done this before, and there is an element of giving up IP because your co-producer in that particular country needs to hold IP, then I definitely, and you're the original owner, then I definitely seek some legal advice on that particular example, especially if it's your first time. It can be quite complicated, and also legally you might need to structure it in a certain way, and they'll be able to advise you on that. You might need to word the contract, certain elements of the contract in a certain way to fit both jurisdictions. So my advice would always be, definitely seek out a lawyer if this is your first co-production and you're giving away IP as well, 100%.
And I think also going back to a point that I think it was Steve that made very early on about, a smaller production company maybe partnering with a larger one that does have those resources and that experience is not a bad way to start as well, if it's your first time and you're a small independent as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Julia or Steve, did you have anything you wanted to add to that one? I think it probably covers it, doesn't it?
Yeah, legal advice all the way, I'd say, because you need to have the groundwork done, and otherwise you will come across problems later on in the process. So you want to get some proper legal advice.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is about the cost of that, and again, coming from outside of a big company, you're right that partnering with someone who can help with that is good, but obviously, do they have your interests at heart? Can you be okay about that? And I wouldn't say that day one I wouldn't have been able to do that because of the prohibitive cost of legals, in the tens of thousands by the time you started a production, if I was just starting up, so it's something really important to sort of bear in mind if you're starting out.
Yeah, and I think that's why through the partnering with a bigger studio perhaps, or a bigger production partner that has that experience and that infrastructure, but again, you'll be giving away some rights to do that. It might not be cold hard cash in this instance, but as you say, to get something off the ground, you have to give something each time, whether it's cold hard cash or some of the rights away. So yeah, it's always difficult to start, isn't it? Yeah. A question from Helena Mitchell. Are most companies, production studios and networks more up for co-producing than perhaps before? Let's ask Julia first this time. In your experience, do you think there are more co-productions happening these days than there were before?
Yes, and I think so, because there's not enough money in the market. The market is fragmented, audiences are fragmented, budgets are down, and I think to get anything off the ground, you need to have a co-production, unless you are a Netflix or you are an Apple or an Amazon. But I mean, even Netflix in some instances, they co-produce and they don't fully fund. Interestingly, so for Amazon, for example, I don't know if you guys are aware, but for the last 3 years or 2 years, we've been distributing the Amazon original catalog. And that came about because Amazon fully funded their kids shows for a while. Mm-hmm. So they controlled the rights and they could give them to a distributor like us. But yeah, I mean, the budgets were enormous, and they then completely changed their strategy because it is a lot of money that you need to recoup. So yeah, I think more co-productions than before.
Well, they ended up closing the kids department completely.
Yeah.
They spent all the budget.
They spent all the budget, yeah.
That's good. I think that's a good question. I just want to try and finish on one last one from Claire Handley, which is quite an interesting conversation. I'm going to throw this to Alex first. What role does this, I'll start that again, but with real words. What role does the distributor play in structuring co-productions?
Funny question for me, because it's all in-house, isn't it? So it's probably a better one for Julia. However, in my case, I came out of a background of financing and co-productions and financing tax credits and all that kind of stuff. So in our case, I mean, the rationale for starting 16 South Rights from Colin was because we wanted to distribute our own IP. And to keep that expertise in-house. I just so happen to have a little bit of financing knowledge. So in Odo's case, it all sort of married quite nicely together with the 11 pre-sales. So the distributor can play a part, and I have found in my previous life that the distributor can play a role. They can offer up an MG. They can, because especially in Zodiac Kids' case, they have operated in various jurisdictions, various co-productions across animation, live action, whatever it might be, across the age groups. So they can, if you're a producer looking at a first co-production, I definitely think a distributor can give you, as well as an established studio, as we were talking about earlier, can give you that sort of know-how and tips on what to look out for, and they can massively help, as I've seen done before in my previous life.
Yeah. Well, look, maybe a bit unfair to throw it to you first, but Julie, would you have anything to add to that about the role that a distributor can play with the initial financing as well?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it depends on the distributor. So if we came on board at for a third-party project, it would be more gap financing. And then, an MG is not going to be a fundamental piece of financing. It's sort of the final gap that you still need to achieve.
And just for clarity, Julia, just for those that might not understand that they're listening, an MG is what and does what for both parties?
So that would be in a minimum guarantee or an advance that a distributor pays for the distribution rights, and that's not going to be millions, so it's not going to be a fundamental part of your financing. If we came on board, so we do come on board at a much earlier stage, but as a co-producer and distributor then. And for us internally, co-production and distribution sort of works hand in hand. It's invaluable to have a team that knows the international markets, but we work very closely with our internal production departments. We work very, very closely within Zodiac Kids for our own projects. And if we do come on board at a very early stage, we would then, and we would get involved in the funding. We would ask for a co-production credit and some sort of IP share, but we do sometimes come on board at a much later stage when most of the financing is done and there's just a gap that needs to be covered. and then we would purely look after distribution.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks, Steve. I'm not going to ask you the question because I know you've worked with the best distribution company in the world on one of your projects previously, so you don't need to answer that.
Unmentionable.
And also, we're running out of time. I'm being told here. I'm getting the hook come across to go like that to me. So look, I will round this out. Thank you all three of you, Julia, Alex, and Steve, for partaking. It's been great. Thank you to Shannon for organising, and Greg and Lauren and Jackie and Darren for organising and helping get everything up on air for us. I'm desperately now scrolling down to my closing speech because it just got clicked off, but there we go. Steve will be in the Wonder in a couple of minutes. In Wonder in a couple of minutes, and he'll be chatting there for about 45 minutes. Also, and there will be John Rennie and Phil Stewart talking about working with Unreal. So do click on that link and join them. The next session is at 4 p.m. when the session Productive Partnerships will explore what some of the larger producer distributors are looking for in terms of IP and partnerships with smaller companies. This session will feature some of ABC's international guests and is well worth a watch. You should have registered for that and received a Zoom link. If you haven't done that yet, please do so now. Do not miss it. Okay, thank you everyone. Bye-bye and have fun in Wonder. Thank you.